Hi, everyone, and welcome back. We are joined today by Andrey Kortunov, the former director of the Russian International Affairs Council. So, welcome back to the program.
Thank you.
So, I really want to discuss with you today a report which you contributed writing, which is on the extra regional actors in the Middle East. As we know, well, the Middle East is a fascinating region because not only is it strategic, but many of the key actors are not part of the region, which is often why it's been a recipe for great power rivalry as well. However, the Soviet Union got largely squeezed out in the 70s and 80s, at least taking on a smaller role. But we see now Russia's making a big return, and still there seems to be an effort to avoid any return to bloc politics as it seeks to seemingly reach out to all the major actors in the region and not recreate what we have in Europe now. So I was just wondering how we can understand the development of Russian foreign policy in the Middle East today. That is, its interest, priorities, and I guess how this translates into a cohesive policy.
Well, thank you for the question. Let me start with arguing that historically the Middle East region has never been self-sufficient in terms of security. It has always been a part of a larger security system with external actors playing very important roles. That was the case with the Ottoman Empire, and then later, after the end of the First World War, the region was engaged into great power competition. Specifically, major European nations played a very important role in managing the security agenda of the region. Then it was the US-Soviet competition. Closer to the end of the 20th century, it was the United States, which stood out as by far the most important external security provider. So there is a tradition of external engagement. And moreover, if you take a closer look at the region, you'll see that the countries which can claim security self-sufficiency are primarily non-Arab nations of the region, like Turkey or the Islamic Republic or Iran, to some extent Israel, but not the major Arab nations of the Middle East. So that creates problems for the region because it is very difficult to articulate specific security interests that would be different from that of external players. And of course, for a long time, the region has been a playground for major powers competing for influence positions, developing the outreach capabilities, opening their military bases, and so on and so forth. So the question, I think, for the region is whether finally it can become self-sufficient and sustainable in terms of its security architecture. And I think the question remains open. As far as Russia is concerned, I think that it's a long-standing position of the Russian Federation that there should be only limited engagement of external players, and the ideal security arrangement for the region is that of collective security, which will be inclusive rather than exclusive, which will embrace not just Arab nations, but other nations of the region as well. We are not yet there, and of course, many would argue that it's an uphill battle, but that remains the strategic aspiration of the Russian Federation.
Well, a lot of the relations between Russia, though, and the Arabs were, I guess, tainted or impacted by Russia's engagement with Syria. That is to prevent the regime change which has now indeed taken place. But I guess, this is ironic because Syria is really a key. The Syrian war is a key area where Russia re-entered the Middle Eastern region, where it asserted itself more strongly. But at the same time, it was also had some unfortunate impact on relations with other actors in the region. I was wondering how policies or how Russia's position in the Middle East is being changed now that the Western countries were successful in the regime change and I guess and ended the position that Russia had in Syria.
Well, my take is that the Russian engagement in Syria was not a rule, but rather an exception from the rule, because traditionally, especially after the fall of the Soviet Union, Russia always tried to keep delicate, well-calibrated balances in its approaches to the region. Balances between Arabs and Persians, between Shia and Sunni, between Israelis and Palestinians, between Turks and Kurds. And if you look at the majority of conflicts in the region, you'll see that Russia is one of a few countries, especially external players, that enjoys good or sometimes very cordial relations with both sides of the conflict. And we see that in places like Libya and in Palestine and in the Gulf area. Syria was an exception in the sense that Russia supported Bashar Assad. It took sides. It relied on Bashar Assad, at least until recently. And that's why now it has to consider damage limitation as a part of its strategy, not only in Syria, but beyond Syria as well. And we now can observe that half a year after the fall of Bashar Assad, Russia is still present in Syria. Russia still keeps control over the major two military installations that it has at its possession, that there are negotiations with the new Syrian leaders. At the same time, Russia, to the best of my knowledge, has not burnt its bridges to Kurds or to Turkey or even to Israel. It might have reservations about what Israel or even Turkey are doing in Syria, but Russia keeps the doors for consultations open. And I think that in a way it is getting back to where it was traditionally, a balancing actor, an actor that can work on the margins, an actor which can capitalize on a good knowledge of the region, on the deep experience in working with various forces in the region. And I think that this is a kind of natural state of the Russian approach to the MENA region at large.
How about the presence in Syria, though? Would be too uncomfortable to keep a military presence as it did with the naval base and as it had in the past, given the I guess the unpredictability of the new government?
Well, you're right. I think that we cannot take it for granted. No one knows what will happen tomorrow or the day after tomorrow. And indeed, the terms of the Russian engagement with Syria might change. By the Syrian side, they might attach more strings to this arrangement, and we cannot rule out an influence of various other external players, like Ankara, for instance, which might have its own aspirations and its own priorities in terms of its military presence in Syria. So it remains, at least in my view, it remains rather shaky. However, I think, having said that, my take is that practically any government in Damascus should be interested in keeping some Russia's presence in the country to counter the predominant influence by other players. Right now in Syria, we see a competition between Israel and Turkey, and no matter who wins in this competition, Damascus might have to foot the bill. So I think that at least I don't rule out that for the decision makers at Damascus, and some of them are exceptionally bright and smart people, Russia might be an important minority shareholder in their country.
I know that China went to some great lengths to improve relations between Saudi Arabia, as well as the Gulf states, and Iran to reduce some of the tensions. And this seemed to be, to some extent, also due to national interest. That is, it would be easier to work with all sides if they weren't in such strict conflict. And also, of course, if this Cold War, as it was between the Saudis and Iran, would come to an end, and it would unravel some of these alliance systems which the United States has built in the region. So again, the mere, I guess, great power interest. The U.S. has, of course, a lot to lose if peace would break out. But to what extent does Russia have any similar initiatives like the Chinese to try to bring some of the Arabs and the Iranians together, at least reduce the scale of tensions?
Well, I think that basically Moscow and Beijing are on the same page on this issue because in both capitals they are concerned about what can be labeled as an Arab NATO, a grouping of Arab states together with Israel, consolidated by the perceived challenge from the Islamic Republic of Iran. I think that Russia, at least the Russian leadership, strongly believes that we should not compromise the centrality of the Palestinian problem to the long-lasting peace in the Middle East. And if in Washington there are politicians who believe that the Palestinian problem should be replaced by the Iranian challenge, this is clearly not the idea that can be supported from Moscow. For very pragmatic reasons, Russia doesn't want to make a choice between Iran and the Gulf Arab states. Neither wants to make such a choice Beijing. Both Russia and China would like to explore opportunities on both sides of the Gulf, and they are interested to see an inclusive, not an exclusive, security arrangement in the region. And of course, they would like to do whatever they can in order to avoid a situation when the region is going to slide to a bipolar confrontation like the old Cold War in Europe. It's not yet clear whether Moscow and Beijing, even together, are in a position to somehow assist the region in moving to an inclusive security arrangement. We know that the relationship between Tehran and Riyadh are very complicated, that there is clearly lack of trust on both sides. There are concerns, there are prejudices, and there are many obstacles to any real reconciliation. But again, as a former historian, I can tell you that Iran was there for a long, long time. You cannot simply take the map of the region and then carve out the Islamic Republic and say that it doesn't belong to the region. It is not factually true. and Iran will always be there. So it is in everybody's interest to make sure that Iran is somehow accommodated. Of course, this accommodation will require adjustments, not just from the Arab side, but from the Iranian side as well. And we can only hope that both Arabs and Persians demonstrate the needed degree of flexibility, and I would even venture to say empathy, because without empathy, it would be very difficult to move ahead.
No, wishing away Iran, I think it's as useless as Europeans trying to wish away Russia. It's a recipe for instability and disaster. Uh, but on Russia and Iranian relations, though, they really moved a lot forward during the years of common interest in Syria. And I remember a lot of Russians were speaking about the possibility of taking this limited area of shared interest and translate it into something wider of a common interest, especially as Russia began to look more to the east for economic partners and I get a larger geo-economic shift. But what are the main impediments, or how do you see the future of a strategic partnership between Russia and Iran, especially after the recent attacks on Iran, which probably have softened Iran's views towards making itself too dependent on foreign allies?
Well, it is a complicated relationship, and definitely there are opportunities, but there are also problems between Moscow and Tehran. If we were to talk about problems, I would probably start with history. This relationship has never been an easy one, and there were many wars between Russia and Iran, and you go to Tehran, and there are still grievances about the past, especially if you take the 20th century, where the Soviet Union, together with the United Kingdom, actually partitioned Iran during the Second World War to prevent Germany from taking over. So it is one of the issues that should be kept in mind, and it will take time. It will take a lot of effort to somehow erase these negative historic memories on the Iranian side. Another problem that we have with Iran is that our economies are not really mutually complementary. You take Russia and China, or even Russia and India, you'll see a degree of complementarity. Russia supplies China with its energy resources, with its agricultural products. It can provide certain mostly defense-related high tech. In exchange, China can help Russia with consumer goods, with various machinery, and with some, civilian, say, autos and other stuff. With Iran, it is not that evident, because both Russia and Iran are major energy producers. They have to compete on global markets. They definitely cannot trade energy between themselves. So if you look at the level of trade between Russia and Iran, it is not very impressive. It is growing, but it is growing slowly. The same can be said about investments. There are a couple of large-scale demonstration projects. The most visible is, of course, the Bushehr nuclear power plant. But small business, medium-sized business is not really actively engaged in this investment or trade between the two nations. However, in many ways, Iran is indispensable. For instance, it is indispensable as an important link in the north-south transportation corridor. You cannot bypass Iran. You have to engage Iran to make sure that this project takes off. I wouldn't underestimate the economic capacity of the Islamic Republic. They have good engineering schools. They have a rather developed machine building industries. And of course, there might be also a lot of cooperation in agriculture, in services. So there are opportunities. They're not easy to explore. They will require a lot of legwork, a lot of stamina and commitment, but I think that it is not beyond our reach. On top of that, we should not forget that Iran is a part of various multilateral arrangements in Eurasia, and that includes the Shanghai Cooperation Organization and BRICS. And Iran, this year, they concluded a free trade agreement with the Eurasian Economic Union. So these trade and investments are gradually growing. And I think we can also talk about more intense political cooperation, including joint military exercises and solidarity voting in the United Nations on a number of issues. So I wouldn't expect miracles, but I think that we are on the right track. We signed a new agreement with Iran earlier this year, and now, of course, the trick is how to implement this agreement, how to pave the way for more multifaceted, more intense cooperation or even collaboration between the two nations.
It's interesting what you said about the history, because I was in Tehran 3 months ago, and I was told more or less the same thing, that the history or the ghost of the past, that this is still something that often hangs over many people, a source of well, you can say distrust. But at the same time, I was also told that the views of Iranians towards Russia has changed dramatically over the last decade as well, as the two countries have gotten much closer than they were in the past. But as you said, history is very difficult to overcome. But you did mention the international north-south transportation corridor going from Russia, Iran to India, but of course also including some of the adjacent countries. But what is the potential of this? Because this seems like an important part of Russia's Middle Eastern policy, in terms of having a more diversified infrastructure in the greater Eurasia region. So everything isn't too China-centric. But with this new wars, the problems with Azerbaijan, are there any threats to this project?
Well, first of all, let me just say a few words about history. I think that if you look back into history, Russia and Iran, the two great empires, fought primarily about South Caucasus, about places that later on became Azerbaijan, Armenia, and Georgia. And I think that the good news is that now all these nations are independent. They are open to work with everybody, including Tehran and Moscow and Ankara. So in a way, it might be easier to overcome this unfortunate legacy of history because it is no longer a zero-sum game. And everybody can benefit, and that's why, for instance, in Moscow, they advance the concept of 3+3 negotiations, that three South Caucasian states, Georgia, Armenia, and Azerbaijan, together with three major neighboring nations, Russia, Iran, and Turkey, should work together on issues related to both security and development. It's not a very easy plan to implement. Of course, there are many reservations and concerns, and there's a lot of opposition to this format, but I think that in certain ways it clearly makes sense because it puts the Caucasus into a more multilateral framework. Now, getting to the North-South corridor, it's not a new idea, as you probably know. They talk about this project for already a couple of decades, and there are various routes for these transportation corridors, at least three. We can talk about the eastern route, which goes through Central Asia, through Kazakhstan, and further south, Turkmenistan, Iran, and then Pakistan. We can talk about the Trans-Caspian route, and it's a transit between the northern Iranian ports and Astrakhan, and now Iranians likely to invest a lot of money into the Astrakhan transportation facilities, so they clearly bet on this particular option. And of course, there is the western route, which should go through Azerbaijan and further through northern Iran and further south. So there are various options which are not necessarily mutually exclusive. When they project the volume of cargo that can be transferred through this corridor, they usually talk about 30 or 40 million tons a year, mostly containers, but maybe not only containers. So it's not really a revolution in the global transportation. Definitely it will not replace the Suez Canal or other major international transportation routes, but it will clearly help to serve a number of countries, especially landlocked countries, which would like to increase the number of access routes to the global ocean. So in regional terms, this is an important project. Now, is it in competition with the Belt and Road project? I don't think so. I think that it's not really competing with the East-West transportation corridor, but it might be complementary to what is done along the East-West route. A lot will depend on the economic situation in countries along this corridor, to what extent they're ready to make a real commitment, to what extent they're ready to invest into adjacent industries. But I think that definitely this project does have a future, and I hope that it will emerge as a serious international transportation corridor before too long.
It's interesting. How I said, it's not a new thing. A lot of the routes still goes along somewhat the same route as when the Americans supplied the Soviets weapons during World War II. So there's some consistency there. But on the topic of the Middle East, it's one shouldn't leave out Israel, of course. And I remember I spoke once to Ehud Olmert in Kazakhstan back in 2018, and he was making this point that the Israelis would always have like a special relationship with the Russians because of World War II, the liberation of Auschwitz. So there was he referred to, I think, as a special relationship. Now, of course, the Russians and Israelis often find themselves on opposing sides of some interest, be it in Syria, for example. But still, there's always been this sense of mutual respect, holding communication lines open. But something seems to have changed over the last years, though. That is, with Israel being seen to give some support to Ukraine, but also with Russia beginning to move closer to Iran. That and of course, you can put the recent Israeli genocide on top, in which Russia has been more critical verbally at least, of Israel than it usually is. To what direction is this relationship going? Is this a bump in the road, or are we seeing a wider split between the two countries?
Well, my take is that, of course, this particular relationship is much more complicated now than it was, let's say, 4 years ago. And you're absolutely right. There were two important factors, though there were some other factors as well, but the two factors turned out to be the most important. The special military operation, which had a very significant impact on the public moods in Israel, and there are many pro-Ukrainian groups in the country. There is also pressure from Europe for Israel to subscribe to EU sanctions, although Israel resists this pressure, but definitely that made the relationship more complicated. And the second factor is the Israeli operation in Gaza. And Russia has always been very critical of what Israelis have been doing there. In Moscow, they believe that it is a clear case of an excessive use of military power. It's kind of indiscriminate damage to the civilian population. And here, Russia associates itself with most of Arab nations, which are also very critical of what Israel is doing. However, I think that the reality is that neither side, neither Israel nor Russia, is ready or willing to break this relationship completely. Because indeed, you mentioned history, but I would add that there are many Russians and Russian speakers in Israel. There are many people who have dual citizenship, and they cannot be abandoned by Moscow. Israel remains a partner, and definitely Israel is not an unfriendly country. It has not adopted any anti-Russian sanctions. It is still an important window for Russia to remain a part of the global economy, including global high-tech economy. And I would also argue that there should be some personal chemistry between the two leaders, between Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Putin. Definitely, they both attribute a lot of attention to the Second World War. For them, it's not just medieval history. It's a part of the world they live in. And I think they understand each other quite well. So my take is that though the Russian-Israeli relationship is complicated and it is likely to stay complicated in future, there are certain red lines that neither side is ready to cross. So this dialogue will continue. I think that there might be a lot what happens behind closed doors in terms of consultations. And definitely Russia will keep an eye on political developments in Israel, because Israel will face next election no later than next year, and there might be political changes in the country. So let's have some patience to see how it turns out. But as I said, I do not foresee any dramatic change in this relationship to take place anytime soon.
Just as a last question, what do you see as being the main challenge? Because again, the Middle East just seems like it's going through such a major change now. That is, the United States will, I guess, grudgingly have to accept at some point a more moderate role in the international system. The Europeans will have significantly less influence as well. You see Turkey reasserting itself, both left and right. We have the possible collapse, if not balkanization of Syria. Libya could unravel as well. The Palestinian issue continues to be problematic. As you said, Israel is hardly stable at the moment either, and Iran, after the recent attack on its nuclear reactors, might go in an unpredictable direction if it deems it necessary to increase its own deterrence. I mean, across the region, there's a lot of changes happening. Of course, you can throw in Saudi Arabia, UAE, and Qatar trying to diversify their foreign ties. Um, how does Russia navigate through all of this with also trying not to get pulled into something? Because I guess, an unfortunate part of Russian history is whenever there's a major war emerging, Russia often gets pulled in, um, and it's often a good idea to keep a distance as well. So, but nonetheless, it is a security provider in the region. So how is I guess Russia navigating its way through this upcoming mess?
I think that there is a more general challenge for all external players in the region. They all have to distinguish between what they can do and what they cannot do. Because I think that for a long time, many external players suffered from overconfidence that, we can come in and we can fix the region. Maybe not alone, together with other great powers, but we can fix it. We know how to do it. We know where the problem is and how to solve the problem. And I think that no one can solve problems of the region except for the region itself. We cannot and we should not try doing the job for Arabs or Jews or Iranians or Turks. They have to be at the driver's seat. External players can assist. They can provide fuel to this car. They can help with navigation. They can help with the maintenance of the vehicle, but they should not replace the driver. And I think that everybody is learning this lesson hard way. There were times when Europeans were overconfident that they know how to handle the region and how to find solutions to all of its problems. Later on, I remember the Soviet Union expressed the position that they invented a model for the Middle East modernization, this state socialism, Arab type socialism. The United States later on apparently believed that they can create this greater Middle East, which will be safe and liberal and democratic and stable. But this overconfidence always backfired. So I think that we external players can assist the region in managing its problems by giving advice, by engaging these actors into broader multilateral international structures, by providing economic, technical, and maybe military assistance. And the key issue is not to hurt, not to turn the region once again into a playground for great powers competing with each other. It's easy to say, it's much more difficult to implement, but I think it's the only way to go if we want to see this region as stable and prosperous.
Yeah, so I think that is always been the challenge, avoiding making the Middle East into some confrontational chessboard. I guess a more humble, moderate position in the region is a good place to start. So thank you so much for your time. And I always enjoy reading your articles. So thanks again.
Well, thank you for inviting me, and take care.